Okay, so I'm going to introduce myself, and thank you, Cheyenne, for that introduction as well. So, bonjour, Caitlin Indijnakas, Minwa, Waba, Washkajikwain Indijnakas, Mang Nadoda, Marawan Dojaba, Elganendayan. My name is Caitlin Patterson, and my spirit name is White Deer Woman. And I'm from the Loon clan, and I'm, mixed ancestry Algonquin. My mom's Algonquin from Mattawa. That's where my, Algonquin family lives. But I grew up here in the Kingston area. Kingston, of course, is on the traditional territories of the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabeg peoples and Huron-Wendat. Um, and and I grew up here in Kingston, which is where my dad's family is mostly from. And it's where All Our Relations Land Trust works, which I'll talk about in a little bit. And I'm so grateful to be here to talk about this work. I've been working on this land trust, this project for what feels like much longer than just a couple of years, but since at least 2021. Yeah, so I'm excited to share what we do as a land trust and our involvement in that and who's been involved and the work that we've been um, participating in. Okay, so I'm going to jump into things. Maybe. Okay. So, All Our Relations Land Trust. We created this land trust. There's a couple of us who co-founded the land trust. I'm one of those people, the current chair of the board. An Ojibwe grandmother named Maureen Buchanan, also a co-founder, and who's from Botswana, but has lived in Kingston for roughly 3 decades. Also Sheldon Travis, who's a Mohawk man, ancestry from Six Nations, and then we've grown out our board since then to include a Métis guy named Sean Melnick, and then Sheila McGinty from Garden River, and also Natasha Darling from Tyendinaga. And all of us have lived in the Kingston area for a long period of time, kind of sporadically coming and going, and some of us staying and living here most of our lives. And we've worked together over the last couple of years to create this land trust. So All Our Relations Land Trust. It's an Indigenous-led charitable organization created by, as I mentioned, members of the urban Indigenous community within Katarokwi, which is Kingston area, kind of greater Kingston area in Ontario. We federally incorporated in February 2022, and we became a charity in January 2023, so pretty recently. Our mission and our vision, you can see here on the page, our mission is to support and restore ecosystems in Katarokwi and safeguard the life of the land for the benefit of past, present, and future generations of all our relations. And through Indigenous-led action in an urban space, our vision is to transform the way people conceptualize and relate with lands and waters in order to strengthen ecological kinships that protect the continuation of life. And I apologize if you can hear the construction that is above me right now. I'm in this apartment building and the person above me just moved out and they're kind of tearing everything apart. So if you hear kind of loud noises, that's what's going on. You have to bear with me. Okay, so we live and work on the traditional territories I mentioned, in Kingston of the Anishinaabeg, Haudenosaunee, and Huron-Wendat, and within Dish with One Spoon territory, also known as Gado-Naganina, our dish. And apologies, I'm not a I'm not a first language speaker. I'm, a baby language learner. I might always be. And apologies to all those first language speakers out there who know I'm getting it wrong. Katarokwi is home for approximately, 7,000 Indigenous peoples with ancestry and identifying as First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. And as an urban Indigenous group living and working within the territory, we acknowledge and pick up Gado-Naganina responsibilities to care for the lands, waters, and more than human beings who support us within Katarokwi. The land trust right now cares for 2.86 acres of land on the east end of the city of Kingston. So you can see kind of a map in the corner there of where we're located, that red arrow, that red circle, that's where we're at. And then this is an aerial shot of the, roughly 3-acre plot. that we work on. And this land was just gifted to us, to the Land Trust by the United Church of Canada in December 2024. And before that, it was used by the church or like rented out, and used as a hayfield for about 3 decades. So as you can imagine, the soil's pretty compacted here. It was a lot of course, monocrop. Planting and harvesting. And so we've had to do a lot of work to kind of replenish the land and plant a lot of native species to increase its biodiversity. And in 2022, members of the urban Indigenous community began caring for this space. So before the land was, officially transferred, there were Indigenous community members who were caring for the space. And since that time, we've started an Indigenous food sovereignty garden. So that kind of garden space is up in the right corner of this photo, and planted over 1,600 native trees and shrubs of approximately 60 different species, with, of course, the help of, one, community volunteers, and a lot of those being kids and youth from elementary schools, high schools who come by and on field trips and have helped us plant, which is pretty special because they can watch those forests grow, watch those plants grow over time. Long after some of us are gone. And also help from an organization called Little Forest Kingston, which is an organization that plants little forests like we have on site here at the Indigenous Food Sovereignty Garden. They, of course, are a key partner of our organization, have helped us over the years. So this is the space. There's been a couple changes. This was, I think, 2 years ago this photo was taken, so I kind of need to update this. But just to give you a sense of where we're working. Okay. It was very important to us as a land trust to receive this gift of land so that members of the urban Indigenous community can continue caring for the Indigenous Food Sovereignty Garden that we started, during the pandemic, as a way to fulfill Haudenosaunee responsibilities in an area at risk of further urbanization within Katarokwi. And right now, the East End faces pressures for more housing and industrial development. As the city's population grows, we're near freshwater source. People are going to be moving here more frequently, increasingly. And caring for the garden is just one way, and how we take direct action so that the beings who currently live here in this area will survive any kind of changes that are going to come with that housing development and industrial development. And in the photo you can see on the left here of the screen, I think you can kind of see the property lines of where, the land is being farmed, and then the property line of that kind of green grass on the other side or pasture on the other side. So all of that space that's kind of surrounding the garden is going to be developed over the next, 10 years or so in Kingston. There's already very specific plans for that land. And so the landscape is going to be changing, and that comes with increased threats to our ecosystem. And so we are working with the city to lessen those impacts and make the development that occurs there, more shovel-worthy rather than shovel-ready, kind of just like a remove everything, pave everything approach, to more kind of strategic planting and development to minimize impacts. That's a whole other project in and of itself. So thinking about our kind of collaborations outside of the land trust and working together to maintain and increase biodiversity. Okay, so some of the activities that we've been engaging in over the last jeepers, I guess it's into our 5th year. Wow. Wow, okay. Some of the activities that we've been engaging with over the last 5 years, well, I mentioned we have an Indigenous food sovereignty garden where we grow a mix of conventional and traditional foods, and we prioritize growing native species on the land. The food we grow has been distributed throughout the community with help from local organizations, including, Kingston Native Center and Language Nest, previously Kingston Indigenous Languages Nest, and also Loving Spoonful through food sharing shelves, and also like free market or pay what you can market stands, and then also the Native Centers programming supporting that as well. But unfortunately, the organization Loving Spoonful in Kingston, if there's people who are from the Kingston area, I'm not sure where everyone's from today, but You might know Loving Spoonful is closing. It's a long-standing community food organization in Kingston. And so we're experimenting. We need to experiment with new ways to share food. So maybe we can talk about that after if people have ideas of things you've done in the past, things that have worked well to make food more accessible to community members who need it, who want it, and medicines as well. So this year, some things we're trying. We're going to be starting up a monthly cooking club, I believe either at the Native Center or a community kitchen. We're going to be freezing meals and distributing throughout the year, drying food, herbs, medicine, distributing throughout the year, and then also bringing food to the Native Center as a focal point of distribution and sharing. Some of the medicines we grow, like, I mean, there's a whole variety, but some of the key medicines we grow are sema or tobacco, gijik, cedar, mashkadewashk, maskadewashk, which is sage, wingashk, sweetgrass, so daimonon, strawberries. We save these, we use them for ceremony. For strawberries, we eat them very quickly because they're delicious. And we also share them out with community members who need them. And we have an opening ceremony happening tomorrow at the garden to start our season. And we've got all of, or not all of, but a lot of dried medicines ready for a new season to do that work, to that spiritual work. We also care for a fruit orchard, so cherries, cherry trees, apple, pears. No pears yet, but we do have apples and cherries. And last year we had like some of our first fruits, and because it's a very new orchard, it was planted, I think, like maybe 3 years ago. And we had enough cherries. I went home and I made a pie. Yeah, it was pretty great. Crust could have used some work, but that's okay. We also have, and I brought that to the land and shared it. I didn't just eat it all by myself. Okay. We have a black walnut grove that we planted, and that was actually my first job at the garden, was watering those black walnut trees once a week, every Friday, lugging buckets of water before we had our kind of water distribution system set up that I'll talk about later. Yeah, carrying pails of water across the land, dunking them in big barrels. Cedar hedgerow, we've got all kinds of berries on the land, blackberries, raspberries, elderberries, all kinds really. And we do like a jam session every season where we make jam on the land. Yeah, usually in July. Come by in July, you might get some jam. We're also involved in a lot of community-based collaborative education. So we've hosted, as I mentioned, countless field trips with hundreds of elementary, high school, and post-secondary students that had come to the garden, participated in ceremony, and contributed to the space, whether it's planting trees or learning about medicines and food. And as I mentioned, most of the trees and shrubs that were planted, those 1,600, were planted by kids and families. There's also kids and family programming. Families with babies and young children from Gwajarri Indigenous-led Child and Family Program also visit the garden, care for the land by planting seeds and harvesting peas and squishing potato bugs and running through the soil and singing and learning their ancestral languages, primarily Mohawk and Anishinaabe from knowledge holders who carry that knowledge and just play and have fun and run around. And that's part of the work that they do. It's part of how they contribute to the space, is what I mean. This intergenerational learning and interaction demonstrates the role that everyone plays, from babies to elders, in caring for Dish with One Spoon territory. We also have ceremony out on the land. So we have, personal sema ceremony, that's tobacco ceremony each time we visit. And we hold our sema in our left hand and hold it to our heart, and we set down our gratitude. We give our gratitude, show our gratitude, and give thanks, and set our intentions for the day, for the season. It allows us to explore a collective remembering of our fundamental relationship with Shkagmakwe, or Mother Earth, as a beloved relative, right? So even though this is 2.86 acres, of property that that's been transferred from the church, it's really not. Land is a living relative. Land is our mother, our provider, our teacher. our kin, a loving, beloved relative. And so when we put that summit down, we remember that, we acknowledge that, and we give thanks, even though we're in, we're working this complex legal structure that doesn't always acknowledge that. So we also have opening and closing garden ceremonies, as I mentioned, and our opening is happening tomorrow, which is very exciting. I got to make some chili and bannock later for that and get our medicines ready for community. We've had sunrise ceremonies, and then community members also come to the land, on their own for their own ceremonies, whether with their families or just by themselves. And then we're also organizing a land gifting ceremony on June 8th this year to celebrate that gifting process, that land transfer process. From the church, because it was transferred, and a promise for an ongoing and renewed relationship with land among Indigenous peoples, the land, community members, and all our relatives in this space. So that's going to be a beautiful day. We're planning, one of my mentors, Karen Labreche from Pikwakanagan, is coming, and hopefully some folks from Manitoulin are coming, and then of course people from the community gathering and people from the church gathering to celebrate what has happened and what has happened over here, that not just the land transfer, but what's happened here over the last 5 years of relationship with land. Okay. And there's a long road ahead as we continue caring for lands and waters in this urban place. But we've made impacts, big impacts since we started this land trust just a couple of years ago. So for example, one of the projects we've been, working on and finished after a successful fundraising campaign, we installed 9 solar panels on our shade shelter and rain collector. So you can see in this photo the panels on the roof of that shade structure or rain collector. And then it's, the water that falls onto that roof is then funneled into those big kind of white barrels that you see. And then there's piping or tubing that goes underground into, I'm not sure if you can see them in this photo, it's kind of cut off for me. Black barrels that stand at the edge. Oh my goodness, so loud upstairs. I don't know if you can hear that, sorry. Black barrels that are at the end of each garden bed, that we either, pour out and bucket out, or do a drip kind of gravity irrigation system for the watering those beds. Sorry, I'm distracted with the noise here. And so those solar panels provide solar energy. We've eliminated the use of gas-powered generator to draw well water. We do have a well on site, which was the main source of our greenhouse gas emissions, that generator. Solar energy also powers a pump that draws water from those rain collector totes, as I mentioned, into the black barrels. So all of that kind of water pumping is powered by the sun now, which is amazing. It reduces the kind of burden on volunteers to do all that watering in our dry months, July, August. I'm so sorry for that noise. We
can't hear it, just so you know. It's not no bother on our end, so don't worry about us.
Good. Okay,
Yeah.
that's good.
Yeah.
Oh my. Okay. With this solar energy, we also have electrical outlets on the land, so we can charge tools and phones and even power a coffee maker on the land. And we've made, coffee for events and things like that. And I personally have not mastered this yet. I don't know what it is about making coffee on the land, but I'm terrible at it. And we're also monitoring how much solar energy we're using and generating on the land, and determining how much greenhouse gas emissions we're offsetting by switching to solar. Yeah, which is pretty cool to monitor that difference, to see our impact over time. And then in July of last year, we created an environmental stewardship circle funded by Environment and Climate Change Canada by way of the Frontenac Arch Biosphere Network to develop an environmental care plan for the Indigenous food sovereignty garden site, so those 3 acres. And the plan is meant to be community-centered, collaborative, inclusive of two-eyed seeing, so Western Indigenous knowledges, that kind of combination. In the co-design circle, we're working with Nathan Mannion, who's a Western ecologist, as well as Nikki Otten, a Mohawk land-based educator from Tanganaga. along with community members, including members of the urban Indigenous community in Kingston. So garden volunteers, community leaders, and allies who are dedicated to urban biodiversity. And in this circle, we know that the garden is part of an ecosystem that's rich in habitat and connected by hedgerows and pastures. It's bounded by the Katarokwi River watershed and close to the Butternut Creek Conservation Area. The Katarokwi River watershed is facing, as I mentioned, rapid change. It's also an area in Kingston that has relatively low canopy cover. And as a land trust, we have an opportunity to design our stewardship practices and develop partnerships to promote landscape connectivity between biodiverse patches and the natural boundary of the watershed, and anchor our land stewardship philosophy in the concept of all our relations, in which relationship with kin is the heart of stewardship. So that relationship with all living beings within our ecosystem, that's the center of what we're doing, strengthening those relationships. And that involves approaches that are community-based and incorporating people of all ages, so babies to elders, and acknowledging the role that we all play in caring for the land. And we are bringing our minds together to form an ecological plan so that we can act now, and then also be thinking ahead 5, 10, 50 years from now, what the next generation might be doing, or might be what challenges they might be faced with. And last year, as part of this kind of environmental circle, ecological care circle, we gathered together for collaborative planning meetings to think through the work we're already doing on the land and what we envision going forward. So in August of last summer, we had our first gathering on the land to receive teachings from Nikki Otten about dish with one spoon wampum and how these teachings can inform our approaches to caring for the land. It was a day of ceremony, learning, feasting, and creating our own dish with one spoon wampum belt as a symbol of our commitment to the project and to the care of the land and to biodiversity within Katarokwi. And so you can see some pictures of that, some wampum beads we're stringing along, and we're continuing to work on this belt and putting well, we had planned to do more at our opening ceremony, but it got switched because of the rain, so we won't be working on it tomorrow. But at future events, we will be. In September 2024, we gathered again to learn about two-row wampum teachings, again from Nikki, and how these teachings can shape our approach to two-eyed seeing. We also learned more about seed saving, to develop a seed saving protocol at the garden, and increase our self-reliance so that we can share seeds with other growers. And relationships with seeds is crucial, absolutely crucial to the continuation of life and developing the knowledges to become responsible with seeds. It's critical to our work around Indigenous food sovereignty. If we want to be self-determining, if we want to make decisions and plan within our food systems and have a sense of I don't like the word control, but to have a sense of an ability to make decisions about our food, having that knowledge about seeds is critical. So we're building that out this year as well. And we also started our ecological monitoring work at the garden last fall. And our first day out together, we spent the day on the land observing goldenrod and asters and identifying different types and learning more about the insects who are relying on those types of plants this time of year. And we, part of that process, not just doing things in like a Western way where you're going out and you're recording things or making notes. We start our observations with sama. So just as we start our work on the land every day, acknowledging our relationship with Shkagmakwe, we do that work in our ecological monitoring. We start with sema, with introductions, just as how I started this presentation, introducing myself in the language and asking permission to learn from the land, and to open our minds and to be quiet and listen, seeking permission to learn about the ones whom we're observing. And this is an important, respectful acknowledgement of the knowledge that plants carry and our privilege, our absolute privilege to learn from them, because we are so dependent on plants, animals, our ecological kin for survival. And honestly, like I'm not, my background is I'm a dietitian. I like qualitative research. Like I'm not a biologist or an ecologist, and I thought like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, what am I looking at here? Like, okay, a plant. What am I supposed to write down here? And as I would kind of work through the day, when you take time to really slow down and listen and observe, just quiet yourself, it's amazing what you can notice. And I remember we had an opportunity to look at some asters, and we were trying to identify, we had like a bit of information with us. We were trying to identify different types of asters on the land. And there was this one type that had like pink and a bit of white. And we were trying to figure out what kind of aster this is. And I was looking through and I was kind of observing and looking at the stems and looking at how it spread. And then those colors kind of came out for me. And I was looking through and I got to identify that it was a calico aster, that those different colors was a key kind of indicator. And I was just like so excited because I don't know, like when you meet someone new, when you meet like a new friend, it's like, oh, here you are. I've identified you. Here's your name. Here's my name. Let's get to know each other. To me, it's so exciting, like to be able to actually identify um, a plant relation in a more meaningful, more in-depth way. Um, is just so important. It's just so cool to me. And to step outside of my comfort zone, out of the world of dietetics and nutrition into, well, into the world of plant relations, which they should go together, but they don't, not in Western education. And in order to care for the land, long term and now, in order to have a reciprocal relationship with the land, we have to actually be in relation. So we have to have those moments. We have to slow down. We have to get to know our relatives. We have to do that consistently. That's what I'm learning. That's been one of my biggest teachings in this process. We also spent a morning observing birds last fall. Again, I'm no bird expert, but I also enjoyed this day. And we were taking notes on the time and the weather and the species, locations, interactions. We learned more about birds that interact with the garden around this time of year. And this was in the fall, so spoiler alert, it was mostly finches and sparrows. So yeah, we'll be doing that at different times throughout the year, this year as well. Okay. And as part of the ongoing work of the circle, we're also hosting Saturdays in the Garden dedicated to ecological monitoring and getting to know our ecological kin. We have some diverse plans for the summer, including beginning with an opening ceremony, as I mentioned, water testing, hoop phenology, soil testing, bird monitoring, some cooking and tasting days, really lots of things going on this year. So that's going to run pretty much throughout the spring, summer, fall before we close in November. Roughly mid-November. We're going to be testing out new equipment that we were able to invest in with some funding, new methodologies that we've been developing with Nikki and Nathan and other community members, and thinking about how we're going to care for the land now and long term. And again, this season is going to be about experimenting, which is going to be really fun. And if you're in the Kingston area, and you want to join us, even if you're not and you want to travel, you're welcome to come out and join us. If you're not already, again, I don't know where people are from, but we have a couple of Facebook pages and we have a website as well, which is listed at the bottom of this flyer I have on the screen. And we're going to be posting, what we're doing when we're doing it. Everything is basically taking place at the Indigenous Food Sovereignty Garden on Mondays, Thursdays, and these ecological monitoring days are on Saturdays, basically every time. So please come out and join us and learn more about the land with us. Oh, also, you can also make donations. You can also support us in other ways and make donations by going to our website, and it goes through Canada Helps, the donation pathway. Just saying. So I think maybe I'll just wrap up and say Chimigwech Bizendawiyag, thank you so much for listening to this kind of short presentation and introduction to some of the things that we've been doing. And personally, as I explore my relationship with Mother Earth, Gagmakwe, in this moment in time of the climate and biodiversity crises that we are facing, I hope to build relationships surrounding our land trust and Indigenous communities, with these groups to strengthen diverse ecosystems that support the continuation of life within Gado Naganina, within our dish. because that's our responsibility as members of the dish, as people living within the dish. I'll also say that a lot of the work we do next, how we vision next steps, will depend on the relationships that we develop, particularly with other Indigenous communities and other Indigenous peoples in the area, and working together to kind of vision out how we're going to work together, what our priorities are as treaty people. And I think the time to act is now because of this crisis we're facing, all the development we're facing in Kingston. And I think that we're stronger together. I think that like as a community, we all bring different gifts, and by working together, we can kind of bring those gifts together to contribute to our goals, to our shared in alignment with our shared values. Yes. So again, Chi-miigwech, Bizendawiyag, and hopefully we can just open it up to chatting, questions, whatever people feel. Miigwech.
Thank you so much, Caitlin. That was really great. I really felt excited for this presentation, especially because it's land-based, and I really appreciate all that you've shared. So we would like to now turn to a question and answer period. Please use the raise hand function, or please type your question in the chat box. So Nat, we have a question. Would you like to go?
Yeah, I thought I'd go ahead and get us started here. So first of all, Chi-miigwech, Caitlin, for that presentation. It was really amazing to hear a bit more about the project and all you've been up to. And something I really took from this presentation is an emphasis on intergenerationality, and the babies getting involved, the elders getting involved. So I wanted to ask you like if we zoom out and we think like multiple generations ahead, or like when the babies working on the land now are elders themselves, what would be your ultimate dream to see with this project? Like if we had an 8-year-old on this land today, and when they're going to be 80, what do you imagine, or what do you dream that the All Our Relations Land Trust could be? And I know, yeah, you personally, because I know it's a very collective feeling project, so don't feel you got to speak on everyone's dream, but yeah, I'm just wondering.
Yeah, like I can really only speak for myself, and I'm chair of the board, but I also think like, yeah, we haven't together visioned out 80 years, but I think what we're doing now is doing that regardless of us having deliberately spoken about 80 years from now, or explicitly spoken about 80 years from now. Yeah, I think like what I would love to see is one, okay, the forest's grown up. Like, I mean, I would love to see, next generation experience that, and to like have them be like have it be a healthy, strong ecosystem where there's lots of biodiversity, and you're able to people are able to go there for medicine consistently, knowing it's going to be there, and and go for food there, knowing it's going to be there. And outside of that site, because it really is a small space, like it can't nourish a whole community, unfortunately. But outside of that space, I wish for what is happening here to spread. Like again, we want to change how people see the land, not as property, not as a commodity, not as a source of money for development, or as a place for development for money. I hope that the values that we have as an organization, as community, to kind of extend and seep out into other kind of structures. Like we're working with the city of Kingston, for example. There's like there's so much opportunity within, industrial land in Kingston to make that more forward thinking, intergenerational thinking. So like promoting connectivity between landscapes and biodiverse patches, investing in training individuals to do that work, to include Indigenous and Western knowledges to do that work of ecological care long term, like putting that as a priority. And yeah, I would say again, like acknowledging the land as like this spiritual this spiritual living being, not as a commodity. Like, there's so many things that I would love to see like the next generation experience. And I think it's just like a growing out of what we're doing, an expansion of what we're doing. And I hope that is what happens. I mean, that's what we're all working for at the Land Trust. And we're all volunteers. So, I mean, we care about this mission a lot. And we hope that, in this network and in Kingston, that's just going to keep growing. And there's a lot of people doing work like this. So I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for the answer. I love it. And I really love thinking about the mini forest becoming the big forest, I'm a big tree nerd. So yeah. Thank you.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
You should come join us.
I'd love to. I'd love to. Yeah.
Great, thank you. I actually have a question, and yes, as Nat said in the chat, feel free to raise your hand or add questions in the chat if you prefer it, and I can actually read it out. So my question would be, with this work with community land trust, with trust, and even with community organizing, as we do something for a while, at least for me, I think back and I'm like, oh, I wish I knew this thing, and I would tell people who maybe want to do a similar project. So let's say there's a nation or a group or a collective that wants to do a project, or like kind of growing similar to the way that you folks are at all our relations. Do you have anything you'd like to tell someone who'd like to do a similar project that you've learned that would help them in the future?
I would say, like, I know I've said this, but like relationships really are key. And I think we were doing a lot of our work in relative isolation, like the paperwork, that kind of stuff. And we would reach out to, experts in, like lawyers and accountants and things like that, people like that, kind of one-to-one. But I kind of wish we had taken a bit of a breath and looked at the landscape a little bit more at the start. Who's already out here? And to be fair, there weren't a lot of people out there doing work like this, particularly in an urban space. Like a land trust in a city seems bizarre in the land trust world. I've heard that a lot. But still, there are people doing that work. There are more Indigenous land trusts than there were, 4 years ago, even. So I think if we had taken just a bit of a breath and just tried to make more connections, we could have like relied on each other's supports a bit more. And also like used kind of, there's things that you have to do, like create bylaws and things like this. Like if we could do more sharing of that, and I think that's growing out a bit more. So like if there are new land trusts, that's easier to do. But I do wish we had done a little bit more kind of exploratory work beforehand. We did some, definitely, but yeah, that would be one, is like getting to know people, building out those relationships wider, stronger first, because I think it would have been easier for us to build what we have now if we had that.
Yeah.
But we're still here, so we did okay. We did okay.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I've heard that from a lot of different groups, because once you start it, you're kind of like, oh, we have to water these trees. We have to move these buckets and water these chestnut trees. You can't really go back. So that makes a lot of sense. We actually have a good amount of questions funneling into the chat, so I'm going to start reading them out. We've got a question from John that says, wondering if you can provide more details of the legal process of accepting the land donation, as well as the ecological restoration process from conventional monocrops. Apologies if this was already shared. I got disconnected for a bit.
Sure. So the legal process, I'm actually going to be writing eventually soon, hopefully by the end of this year, a report on the process. Because we created a work plan and kind of worked through all the steps. Really, like before the legal part took place, there was like years of relationship building between Faith United Church and members of the urban Indigenous community. And there was, conversations and relationships built about what would happen to the land and, gifting it and how would that work. Eventually it was decided it was going to be gifted, but like, how do you gift property to an urban Indigenous community that doesn't have like a land base, doesn't have a reserve, isn't a corporation, etc. And so it was ultimately decided by members of the urban Indigenous community to create this legal structure that would hold the land as like like a legal basket, I guess, for this idea for this parcel of land. And so that we could have a relationship with the land long term that would be held in a way where we could care for the land for ecological purposes, also for ceremony, also for cultural practices long term, without it being at risk of like being paved and a building put on the land and etc. Okay, so once we had that, once we had that idea, we then went through step one, which was like creating a nonprofit. We're federally incorporated, and then we had to go through the process of creating a charity. Once we became a charity, then it was possible to have, a transfer from a charity to a charity, without it being a huge financial burden to the church. And then once we had done that, then we started kind of this gift agreement process, which was like a kind of agreement that said, we're going to do this if you're going to do this. And so that took a while to get the language right because we're not lawyers, we're all volunteers. We had some folks with more experience related to urban planning, and also a lawyer helping us, which we were pretty fortunate to have funds from Environment and Climate Change Canada help us with the legal fees for a land transfer. So that was great. That was fortunate. And then once we finished the gift agreement, and then it was pretty fast after that. Then it was like, the land transfer process was facilitated by our lawyer, and that was kind of done pretty quickly. But leading up to that and creating that gift agreement, that took the bulk of the work and doing the investigations that would kind of reduce our life. Oh, honestly, I hated this process, to be honest. Like it was so much Western language around, and that was fear-based. It was like so much mistrust that like to have the land when you give a gift, like you're giving your friend a gift, let's say, giving somebody in community a gift, you give the gift with good intentions. You don't give the gift and think, how are you going to screw me over? Sign this before you accept this gift so that you don't screw me over after I give it to you. It's just such another way of looking at things, and it's painful. For me, it was painful to go through this process. It was maddening. It was stressful. I didn't like it, but it had to happen if we were going to accept this gift and care for it long term. So we had to do a lot of investigations. We had before we started like a lot of the legal process, the church had done or Faith United, I think, had done a environmental assessment. So that was, no major concerns there. We'd looked at well records. We had kind of gone through all of those steps to reduce our liabilities at the time of transfer. We contacted urban planning, the Department of Planning with the City of Kingston, gone through those records, and yeah, a lot of paperwork later. We had created the gift agreement, and then once that was in place and signed, then we were able to move forward with the actual legal transfer. It's pretty dry, it's pretty boring, it's pretty painful, but it was all worth it in the end, in my humble opinion. And then I can't remember the second part of the question.
Yeah, I can tell you the second part of the question. So the second part of the question was, can you provide more details regarding the ecological restoration process from conventional mono crops to what you have now?
Yeah, definitely. So I mentioned like before we were like the members of the urban and Indigenous community were on the land, and before the conversations were starting about gifting the land to the urban Indigenous community. Before that, it was held by Faith United Church in Kingston, and they were going to build a church on the land, and they decided it was not like financially viable to do that. And so in the meantime, as they were holding this land, they just rented it out to a local farmer who had planted hay on the field for like 30 years straight and harvested. And so there was like a lot of like nutrients removed from the soil, and it was obviously, after all that harvesting, it was compacted. The soil in Kingston's like fairly clay-based anyways, but also it's years of compaction, and so moving from that, like we've I mentioned focused on planting native species, like a lot of different native species. So we planted the Little Forest with help from Little Forest Kingston, and then we also we have our garden space, we have a meadow space. There's the fruit orchard, there's like a row of raspberries and cedar and oak and all kinds of trees. There's a hedgerow of cedars, there's black walnut, a grove at the front. Yeah, we've tried to really increase the biodiversity just with plant species. And then we've noticed change in animal patterns. And I think frequency over time, just like I'll just, what's the word? Like casually say that, not like casually, but what's the word? I can't think of it. Anyways, we've noticed that just like informally over the years. Yeah, and for our vegetable garden, we plant vegetables like conventional vegetables that are familiar to community members that people eat, whatever. But we also have like more indigenous foods. So like for example, we've grown like flint corn there. We have a Three Sisters garden, for example, which we have lots of squash vine borer, so the squash like never do well. So unfortunately. But also if you have more tips for that, let me know. I've tried a lot of things, but anyways. And then also our medicines that I mentioned, like the sweetgrass and the sage and sema, and yeah, we plant lots of stuff and a lot of it survives somehow.
Thank you for that very much. Okay, so we have a question from Hannah, as Joe's actual question got answered by you, which was great. So Hannah says, I loved hearing you speak about asking permission to learn and observe. I can certainly imagine for myself ways that being closely observed or scrutinized without consent can feel very invasive. Can you speak to what you feel when there is consent from the land and when there is not?
Well, for me, I think the best, for me personally, the best sign of whether consent has been, the land is okay with me being there and doing what I'm doing, is what happens after. Like, for example, one, if you can kind of feel a change in energy. Like, it impacts, for me, my mood, how people relate to one another. Like when you go to the land and you don't engage in ceremony first, it's different. It's much different than if you do. It's hard to explain that. And then the second thing is like the after effects that I started talking about. So like how the land is responding. Are things growing well? Did the plant really want to be planted there? Is that like really the space for the plant? Did the plant want to be harvested now? And then also like thinking about consent based on what you know about the plant, based on your teachings from the people around you as well. So like, what do we know about this plant and what do we know about how it looks when it's harvested? So all of that comes from like conversations that have happened long before I even got there. Yeah. So I would say change in energies, and then also the physical, tangible things that you can see, changes in the land that occur if you've done things in a good way versus if you've acted in ways that are not in line with how that plant lives well. That's for me anyways. Maybe other people have different experiences.
Thank you. That's great. So we have a kind of a 2-for-1 question here. We have Yusuf and someone named, and thank you for writing out the pronunciation. Asea, do you want to correct me if I said your name wrong? I'm very sorry about that. But we have these 2 questions. One, Yusuf said, what's the greatest barrier to achieving these goals that you have? Is it funding? Is it land access, human resources, legalities, or something else? And then the follow-up in the chat was, how can we help you break these barriers down and support you, Caitlin, your team, and with Land Back?
I would say all those barriers are there, and we need all the help we can get. No, like I would say like, okay, I think it's hard to say like what the biggest barrier is, but like some of the challenges I think that we faced would be like would be well, like okay, the biggest thing is like this structure of settler colonialism that we live in that like is dedicated to us actually not being here and doing this. So it's all of those things combined, right? It's like not having necessarily enough capacity as a community because people are facing oppression on like a myriad of levels, right? Like how do you contribute to a community space when you don't have enough time because you're working full-time overtime and you don't have access to transportation, perhaps you might be low income, or you have, you know, huge family responsibilities. Maybe you're facing like historical traumas that limit your participation in community. There's all these things that like come from these histories of settler colonialism that have, you know, removed Indigenous peoples from the land and set up processes and pathways and policies that restrict us, prevent us from being on the land. Settler colonialism is the biggest barrier. How we've overcome some of those things is relying on the gifts of community members, I think, and building up our capacity and finding allies and supporting one another. I think like the opposite of settler colonialism and these like isolations are connections, are relationships. So with allies, with other Indigenous peoples who have gifts to provide to grow up the strength and capacity of community. And we see that with our volunteer community base. Like, for example, I am an organized person, so I can chair meetings and I can do that work of making schedules and blah, blah, blah. And, you know, Maureen has like an amazing knowledge base of Indigenous knowledge and language, and she brings that, and she's a great coordinator and she brings people together. You know, Sheila is like beautiful language, beautiful words. She grows food amazingly, has all this knowledge. You know, everybody brings something to the table. And we have community members that come and do, you know, ceremonies, lead ceremonies and grow food and run our compost and help with construction and speak their languages and all of this work, or bring like urban planning knowledge. That's not something I ever have or ever kind of want to have, but bring urban planning knowledge or like knowledge of we've had like pro bono legal services provided to us. Like those are gifts from people. Researchers at Queen's, for example, have come and helped us with knowledge related to environmental monitoring, or urban planning or things like that. You know, it's coming together. And I think this network is like a testament to that kind of concept as well. It's like, how can we help each other to push back against these oppressive structures of settler colonialism and white supremacy in general that have suppressed our connections to one another and to the land and to all our relations that give us life. What is our biggest barrier? Settler colonialism. What is the thing you can do? Contact me immediately. Yeah. And in general, if you have extra funds laying around, make a donation on the All Our Relations Land Trust website. And if you're close to Kingston, just come on out. Meet us. That would be amazing. Mondays, Thursdays, Saturdays.
Thank you. Okay, great. We have something in the chat from Kathy. It's not a question, but it's a nice note. So maybe Caitlin wants to, you know, keep you know, that in mind. That Kathy will be reaching out to you in the coming days. And they
Amazing.
said, thank you so much for your presentation. So we also have a little bit more time. So if anyone wants to answer and ask any questions, we have until 1:30. You're welcome to also, if you prefer, instead of typing, to like verbally ask your question, because sometimes that, you know, helps to do that. You can also raise your hand. But yeah, I'm just gonna let people, type if they want to type and raise their hand, give them a little time.
Sorry, I didn't know we had
But
to.
also, oh, great. Go
I thought it
ahead,
was
go
ending.
ahead,
I was
Kathy.
thought it was ending now. So I would love to ask a little bit more about, well, I just was putting in the chat that, so I work on the stolen and occupied territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh out here in Vancouver in the downtown east side. And so we're the downtown east side community land trust. We don't own any property. Yeah, or we don't have direct connection to land like you do now, which is so inspiring. And there's a group that run the V6A garden, which is a community garden on a parking lot basically of an SRO. So you're what you were talking about, community land trusts in urban settings were really part of that. And so it was really exciting to hear the amount of land you have is really inspiring because we have such a small piece, but people are doing Indigenous-led group called Limgak is doing similar work in much smaller space. So, but I was sad to hear about what you said about Love and Spoonful, and the work in the downtown east side is a lot of there's food sovereignty work, and so I did have a question about how closely you're tied, and also if you wanted to talk later more about how to collaborate around food sovereignty more broadly probably for Kingston, the similar what we're doing in Vancouver. But is that group completely closing, and are you already connected with them?
Yes, unfortunately, that group is closing. I think they're closing officially in May. But their services are not going to be available for distribution this year, not at all, which is really unfortunate. Not only for our food distribution kind of needs, but they've done a lot of great work in community related to food sovereignty broadly and strengthening food systems locally. So we're thinking about there's like one other option for food distribution that so far I haven't kind of made a connection with, but there's still hope alive for that to maybe work out. But otherwise, exploring different pathways. So we just applied for a grant, for example, for to fund like a 0.8, I think, like almost full-time position for someone to drive food to community members, like gas covered, who aren't able to come out to the land. So just kind of like a good food box kind of delivery model like that. And then also doing the cooking club. So once a month at the Native Center or a community kitchen for that person to run that, because otherwise for us to take that on is like way too much. We could just do the bringing the food to the center last year to have it distributed by someone else. So hiring another person would be key, and then also supporting that person with an income, or at least not a full-time income, unfortunately, but a partial income. Oh, that's supplemental income anyways to do this work for now, and then hopefully if it goes well, we can kind of look at long-term solutions. We applied for that funding for about a year and just under 2 years. So it'll give us a chance to test it out, maybe do some evaluation so that we can like justify it to other funders in the future for a long-term funding position. But that's right now, this year is the problem I'm focusing on. So yeah, but yes, definitely. I'd love to talk to you about what you're doing and how you've been able to connect with other groups in your area and what your food sharing looks like and what, your approach to food sovereignty looks like in general. I would love to chat with you more about what your journey has been like too, because I've heard of you, your organization. So I'd love to, I've been creeping around on the internet. So yeah, I'd love to hear more directly from you. That would be great. Oh, I just said I'm creeping around on the internet and this is recorded. That's great. That's great.
Great. So I see a question in the chat from Madeline, and then also Stefan, I see you have your hand up. So I'm just gonna go to Madeline first, and then I'll go to you. Okay, great. So Madeline said, "Thank you so much, Caitlin. This was great. Wondering if you have any immediate or future prospects for another land donation or acquisition of another property, or if not, what are you considering before moving on to another project?
Okay, so this land transfer occurred in December 2024. So I think our, next 2 years at least will be about making sure we can manage this property and all the legal financial costs of that sustainably. Like I think it'll be, we're a new land trust. We are only 3 years old just. So step one, sustainably manage what we have. Our responsibility now. And then I think there are certainly there's been other people approaching us, but we weren't, this was years ago, we weren't in a position to accept any new land or any kind of like new projects, new possibilities for land. There have been people to approach us, so there are opportunities, but it's going to take a few years before we can like realistically, responsibly take on any more land. And I think also, I think part of that process is also making more relationships with surrounding Indigenous communities. Like we exist in Dish with One Spoon territory, and there are, treaty territories within the Kingston area where multiple nations kind of ancestral territories overlap. And so I think it's also important to build up our relationships with those Indigenous communities to kind of like what's the word, like ensure that we're working together for common goals, for we're on the same page if possible. So not getting ahead of ourselves is kind of my answer, but also being willing to, for the continuation of life, take on more land when we're ready to do that. And like, as I mentioned, like there's farmland opportunity with farmland that would require like a lot of fundraising to do. We need more time to do that. There's also like more opportunities, let's say with churches, particularly since we've already worked with the United Church. If we can, if we can show individuals that we can responsibly care for land, oh my gosh, that's terrible. But I think genuinely, like once people see that we are successful at what we do, shocker, people have more confidence in gifting us land. I think right now people turn to more established land trusts first to gift land, especially those with, bigger reputations. And as we grow out, as we become more well known, I guess, that might help. But I am already confident in our abilities. We have a strong group of people, and I already know that we've already been doing this. So they just need to get on the same page as us.
Thank you. So we had a question from Stefan. You raised your hand. Would you like to unmute and ask your question?
All right. Hello, thank you very much, Cheyenne, and thank you, Caitlin, for your lovely presentation. I hope you don't feel I've gate crashed from England, but I'm coming to Ontario in the middle of May. So when I saw this meeting was happening, I thought this was a must join. I'm coming to the Grounded Solutions, their CLT network conference in Washington at the end of May. I've been involved in the CLT movement in England for about 30 years. And it was fascinating hearing Caitlin talk about, the kind of growing a new movement here and all the things that you're grappling with. They all sound very familiar. And I'm not sure whether it's the good news or the bad news is that it doesn't get any easier because we're trying to kind of unmake such established systems of how you do things differently. But the particular reason I wanted to kind of join here was that in England, the CLT movement has been largely focused on affordable housing. When I did my Churchill Fellowship to the USA and Canada back in 2014, I visited Toronto and met the folks at the Parkdale Neighbourhood Land Trust, and they were just kind of getting going. But increasingly, we're finding demand from communities to take on these kind of land use issues, nature conservation, but equally to try and find ways of organizing communities to resist or promote land use changes that are in the best interest of the community. And it's really difficult in England at the moment because the choices are often phrased in kind of very sort of binary terms. It's either food or it's renewable energy, or it's food and no housing. And so we're getting very wound up and kind of frustrated with each other in not being able to have kind of good conversations. And kind of doing a bit of research, I thought, well, if I'm coming to the USA and Canada again, because I have a half sister who lives outside Toronto, I was looking to see whether there are situations in which communities have been initiating these conversations themselves, and find the situations in which they can negotiate sometimes quite big changes in land use or protections against changes which they see are likely to be damaging to their community. And certainly in the research I've done so far, there seem to be organizations in the US that exist solely to promote those kind of conversations. So I was kind of looking for situations where I might be able to meet a community that's kind of going on this journey, trying to imagine what a better way of managing the land in their place looks like, particularly if there's potential for conflict, and how they avoid or resolve that conflict. I've kind of sort of made some research, and it looks like the Thrive organization on Prince Edward Island seems to be an organization that does that. It kind of promotes conversations within its community. And likewise, a bit further north, the Escarpment Biosphere Conservancy, they kind of manage Manitoulin Island and kind of places around there. But just if there was anybody who had any thoughts about situations that might be worth exploring, I've just kind of put my email in the chat and say that the very, very rough dates when I'm likely to be in the area. I'm still kind of doing planning at the moment. But equally, if anybody wanted to kind of ask me questions about how CLT movements grow, I'm very open to have conversations with them at any time.
Well, thinking about like land use planning and zoning changes, like I would say our organization doesn't have a ton of experience with that. I mean, we're pretty new and we've looked at really one property, and really like the way that it's been zoned was and is consistent with the way that we're using it. So we've never had to like apply for a land use change, a zoning change, which would be very expensive. And
Sure.
I believe it's like thousands of dollars if we're just doing it ourselves. So that would be, not affordable for us at this current time. So that would be a major barrier, certainly. But I don't have expertise in that, unfortunately. We've also worked with the city, like in the property next to us, as they're thinking about expanding the urban boundary and changing the zoning and those kinds of things. And we've been working with them, but it hasn't involved like petitioning for a zoning change or like chatting with the city for them to change, in their own process, like their own initiation, not us, because we don't own that land, obviously. So yeah, unfortunately, I can't really comment too much on that.
Thank you.
Great. That was a very great and thoughtful question. Do we have any other questions? We're at 1:17 p.m. We have some time for some more questions. You can raise your hand or you can put it in the chat if you have any.
I think this might be the most questions people have asked me at a presentation so far. So
yeah, well, it's great. And also,
awesome.
if there's no, you can always wrap up too. Like this was a very fruitful discussion. I feel like a lot of people chimed in, and that's always a good sign.
Yeah, maybe we can wrap it up here. Yeah. So,
Okay.
yeah, I'll let you take it from here, Cheyenne. Yeah.
Yeah, so thank you everyone for joining us today. You'll be sent follow-up materials with the speaker contact information, so you can get in contact if you have any questions or you want to visit, like Caitlin said. And you'll also be given links to register for future webinars. And as you know, we're having another webinar coming up soon, which is quite exciting. And you'll also, in that email, will be given details about how to join the National Discussion Group on Community-Based Agricultural Land Tenure. So you'll be given lots of great information, so keep that email open.
Maybe I'll put my email in the chat if anyone wants to contact me. I'll put my
Sure, that's a great idea.
own email in, and then we also have a land trust email, so I'll put both.
And I'll just chime in to say thank you, Cheyenne, for coming to facilitate today. This is really great. Awesome to collab with Sundance Commons. And again, thank you, Caitlin. So there's the all the relations land email and Caitlin's email, and I'll make sure to share it back in the follow-up materials. Thanks everybody for coming and engaging in the discussion, and we hope to have more of these. So great. Have a great day,
Thank you,
everybody.
everybody. Thanks for having me.
Bye.